Oh, empty. Scribbles.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm calling to order the meeting of our council for Monday, May the 1st, 2023. And I will just start by saying Councillor Doherty sends her regrets. She's attending the Ontario Bike Summit today and co-presenting with our Trails and Active Transportation Committee Chair, Murray Knowles, at that summit. So in order to call the council to order, I am going to ask Councillor Baines to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who cared for their families and communities, the way we now seek to care for ours. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and respects all of the nation-to-nation agreements that have formed relationships with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. The reality of our shared history, the current contributions of Indigenous peoples within our community, and seeks to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better, to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
I'm looking for a motion and a seconder to adopt the agenda. The motion reads as follows: that the content of the council agenda for May 1, 2023 be adopted as presented. Councillor Potts, Deputy Mayor Fryer, any comments or amendments? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, please let me know if you find yourself in that position. Regarding the next item is the adopting of minutes, and the motion before us is that the minutes of the council meeting held April 24, 2023 be approved as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Perry, and seconded by Councillor Ring. Any comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? So seeing none, we're on to community announcements, and I am so pleased to welcome our Blues representatives here tonight after their fantastic win on the weekend. So I'll ask to come up and address council and the community, Mr. Terry Geddes, who's the chair of the executive committee of the Collingwood Blues Club. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. I stand before you with tremendous pride today as a Collingwood citizen. 4 years ago, members of this council who were on council at the time passed a motion granting a junior A franchise to Collingwood under the leadership of David Steele. He promised you a provincial championship within 5 years. You take COVID out, and he did it in 2.5 years with this wonderful Blues organization. That in itself is an incredible feat. I stand before you as someone who's very, very proud of the fact that we have a Blues organization. And as Councillor Jeffrey can attest to, the rink was a rockin' and a rollin' on a Friday night. That was jam-packed, and our boys did their best to keep us all tense to the last minute and took it into overtime just for excitement. Didn't care about some of us aging with our hearts, and won it 2-1, and the entire arena went wild, and we probably were heard 3 or 4 blocks away from the arena. So yes, extreme pride. Also extreme pride in having members of the Optimist Club with us, who $3,200 50-50 draw on Friday night, Councillor Bain, and that will of course go to charities within our municipality. So I want to introduce to you David Steele. David Steele is the owner of the Blues. He's the person who's taken all the risks to put this team together, and in my humble opinion, he is one of the brightest young hockey minds in Canada. David Steele.
Thank you, Terry. I'm here to talk to you and of course, explain what our next steps are for the Collingwood Blues. We're going to be, all day today, and I'm sure all this week, we're going to be planning a trip to Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, where we will have an opportunity to face off against all the other provinces' best of the best for hopefully coming back to you guys in a month or so from now with another cup, which would mean we've taken Collingwood and put them on the map already, and we want to be the best in the country. And I think this community deserves that through the support we've gotten from constituents here, businesses here, clubs, memberships. It's been overwhelming the amount of support we've had, and we're excited to do that for the town of Collingwood. And I just want to thank pretty much everybody behind us here for doing this. There's a huge amount of effort, huge amount of labor that goes in, and it doesn't just happen from my seat. It comes from the Optimist Club that is so involved with so many different charities in town. My Friends House, Hospice, the Youth Center, and all these other places that our team directly supports throughout the year. We hope that we can continue to do that into the future and make Collingwood not only the best hockey town, but one of the best places to live in Canada. And I appreciate your time today for hearing us out, and we're very proud to present you with this trophy today. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much. On behalf of the community and council, I'll just say we're so proud of all of the team and the management and all the volunteers who have helped put Collingwood on the map for this championship. Okay, I did the odd puck drop. But I was sitting here also, 5 years ago when you guys came forward to, can we have a team here? Can we use the arena? Can we do a deal? And I know a lot of people sitting around the table thought, can they make it happen? It's really been a long time since we've been able to fill that arena. So you guys did it. And really, as I say, we're all so proud of you.
Enjoy the Collingwood Blues.
After the squad, we have Dylan Kudon, Spencer Young. The last, I've been here for 3 years. Solid Bill family. Staff, all the staff that make our lives super easier. David Steele, of course, our coaches. The thing that makes Collingwood so special is our fans. So, coming to the rink, walking the streets, just getting that. In my life, and I don't think I ever will. Leaving Collingwood, and it's just a special. To come up here and thank you guys all for having us today, but especially we have a few photos for the council members here that these guys will be handing out, and I think we just want to thank so many people in the whole.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Your worship, if we might ask you to come forward for a picture with the Buckland Cup and our team.
Good luck. Godspeed.
Yeah. Go get that trophy.
According to her. I never even heard of it.
Awesome.
I never even heard of it. Oh, yeah.
The families that must do that.
Yeah. I should get some tape and put it down the side of the thing here.
Relation of Portage La Prairie, Alberta. Goodness.
Sure.
Great.
It's in front.
Get in the end, Kathy.
And Your Worship, if I can, while we're taking that, I'd also like to recognize Paul and Dave from Clerkson's. They're the ones who created the poster. And if anyone wishes them, they can come into Clerkson's and get one. Thank you. In closing, Your Worship, we just wish to thank you for the time, Council, today, to Your Worship, to Councillor Jeffrey for all of her support throughout the season. It's been phenomenal. And I'm looking forward to a challenge, hopefully from you, Mayor Hamlin, towards the Mayor of Portage. That would be phenomenal. And we would carry whatever you wish forward to bring back what they were going to have. That's the confidence I've got in these young men. So
Well,
thanks
stay
again.
tuned. It'll come this week.
Thank you very much, members of council, Your Worship, and have a great day.
Thank you. We'll just pause for a minute in case anyone wants to leave. Not that I know you won't find our meeting fascinating, but I totally understand. That's going to be hard to beat. That one is a community announcement.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I'm going to stick to another local hockey story. I'm going to leave the leash for Councillor Ring. I'm sure he'll have something to say. I'm going to talk about yesterday when some of our local lads on the Stainer Siskins, one of which is my nephew, Cole MacArthur, successfully defended their Junior C North Conference title. And they now move on to the Schmaltz Cup and the Final Four tournament in Woodstock. So we're going to wish them the best. And Clearview Mayor Doug Measures is all over it. He's already issuing challenges to the other three mayors. After participating in the OSAM conference in Paris last week, Ontario, as the mayor mentioned last week, I got back to attend the new office opening of the insurance store, the Collingwood arm of St. Clair Insurance Brokers in the Monaco building. It's the former Noble Insurance, which after taking over from Lockhart Motors in 1985, had spent 38 years of its 78 years of operation at the southeast corner of Huron and Huron, Ontario. So now at the other end of Huron, Ontario. I conveyed council's appreciation to President Jamie Mingay for the many years of service to our community and best wishes for future success. Founder Howard Noble, of course, and his son Wayne not only were successful with their business operations, but were always very major contributors to the Collingwood community. Regarding OSAM, I will report on some of the observations from that, but we'll leave that till later in the other business section. A final announcement would be that on Saturday, May 6th at 4 p.m., Collingwood Rotary will hold a commemorative sign event at Sunset Point Park in recognition of the club's tremendous efforts towards the features the park has to offer. It will also posthumously recognize Bev Taylor. And for all his contributions over the many years, he led the club's efforts in regards to the improvements around this town. Bev was another successful business person who was a champion for the betterment of Collingwood's community. And the last note I would mention is George Zerny is speaking at the Historical Society tonight at 7 p.m. And he's going to be showing many of his photos and talking about the changes to Collingwood over the years. So if people can get out to that, I know George would enjoy seeing them. So those are what I have there.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I know while they're not here, I just wanted to expand a little bit in terms of the success of the Collingwood Blues organization in our community. And I want to speak to what fantastic young men and citizens these gentlemen have been during their stay with billet families and in Collingwood. And as early as 2 weeks ago, I know there were 2 or 3 of them in the schools reading to young children. So I say, sometimes it's easy for an owner or a team to go out and to try to research and find talent, but to find talent with that kind of community commitment and what the young men did while they were here, I think is to be applauded by us. So I wanted to add that. And also just to speak really briefly to the success of the wood window preservation workshop held at the Collingwood Library. The co-hosts of the Heritage Committee and the Collingwood branch of ACO were thrilled to have about 30 people there, and particularly pleased to have 4 members of council in attendance to listen and learn, and we did learn a lot. So pass that along.
Okay, thanks so much. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Mayor. This past Saturday, Councillor Perry and I attended the 1-year anniversary of Train for Life and spoke with Braden Usher there, who is also heading off this week out west. He's going to be doing a solo cycling ride, 8,000 kilometers coast to coast across Canada, to raise funds for mental health. So if you go to raceformentalhealth.ca, you can follow along there and hear a little bit about his story.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. Councillor Potts.
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. Collingwood Sports Hall of Fame is holding their induction ceremony Saturday, May 13th at the Royal Canadian Legion. This year we have a guest speaker, Terry Gregson, retired NHL referee. And inductees, Harvey Perrin is a builder, Raymond Sheffield is an athlete in hockey, and the 2017-2018 Collingwood Blackhawks PBAE team. Tickets are still available, and if you're interested in attending, dinner is at 6 p.m. at the Legion, and you can get your tickets through contacting Jim Malley at the Blue Mountain Golf and Country Club. That's everything tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hamlin. As mentioned by Councillor Jeffries on April 26, I also attended at the Collingwood Public Library. I had the pleasure of attending to a full house, I might add, the event for preserving and restoring wood windows and heritage buildings. This highly informative presentation was hosted, as she mentioned, by the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario and the Collingwood Heritage Committee. And it answered a lot of questions that I originally had, and I've got a better idea on the things that we got to look for when we have requests coming in for heritage buildings. Also as Kathy, Councillor Jeffries had mentioned. I would also like to pass on my congratulations to the Collingwood Michael Jackson Blues Hockey Club for winning the Ontario Junior Hockey League Championship. It's something that is not easy to do, and there's people that play sports for a lifetime in this province and never come away with a provincial championship. So that bodes well, and having done that, as to my knowledge, they're the first junior hockey team from Collingwood to advance to a national championship. So I'd like to congratulate them for that, and I wish them good luck as they travel to Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, and I know they'll represent Collingwood, Ontario at the Canadian Championships with grace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today I'm pleased to announce and to note, actually, the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority's release of its 5-year checkup on the health of the Nottawasaga watershed. Today, they've released, or actually, I think Thursday, they released their 2023 sub-watershed health check. Everyone who's concerned about the environment and conservation, and I'm sure that means everyone in the region, should read this report. The report offers information on the health of the forests, wetlands, streams, and groundwater across the Nottawasaga watershed from 2017 to 2021. They also identify future challenges and opportunities to improve ecological health. Overall, this is a quote from Acting Supervisor Ogden, we're seeing a loss of natural spaces, mainly due to land use changes. Despite this downward trend, some parts of the watershed are still seeing positive change thanks to watershed residents, farmers, municipalities, volunteers, and other environmental champions who are committed to restoring our environment, unquote. These health checks cover the entire Nottawasaga watershed and all sub-watersheds in the NVCA jurisdiction. These geographic areas are similar or smaller basins within the larger watershed. Think smaller bowls within one big bowl. Water from each sub-watershed contributes to the streams connected to the main Nottawasaga River, which flows into Georgian Bay. The sub-watershed health checks provide crucial information to anyone who lives, works, and plays in our watershed, said Gail Little, the chair of the NVCA. It's an interesting report. I advise all of you to look at it because there's action that needs still to be taken in order to preserve our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Perry.
Well, thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and congrats again to the Blues. It's we're very proud of you, and it's very well deserved and hard earned. So, congrats again. So, on to the library. The Friends of the Collingwood Public Library is a fundraising body dedicated to helping the library improve its programs and services by financially supporting unique projects. The Friends group sponsored the purchase of the book bike, which I saw drawings of the other day. It looks fantastic, which would be arriving at the library next month. The Friends are currently looking for volunteer members to assist with planning and running fundraising events. Anyone interested can contact Jennifer Perks at jperks@collingwoodpubliclibrary.ca. Also, in partnership with South Georgian Bay Community Health Center, the library is offering Stress Sucks on May 3rd and 10th at 3 p.m. This is a mindfulness workshop designed to help youth develop coping skills and mindfulness-based strategies to deal with stress. Registration is required and can be done at the library's website or by phoning 705-445-1571. And lastly, Collingwood Public Library and E3 Community Services invite you to attend the film screening of Unloved, Huronia's Forgotten Children. This is a heartbreaking yet redemptive film that moves from a highly personal and painful family secret to an investigation of hidden truths about government-enabled systems of institutional cruelty against vulnerable children. Please be aware that the film contains sensitive content that may trigger some viewers. A Q&A panel will follow the screening. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, I'll firstly report that I did go to the Elmvale Maple Syrup Festival and was one of the dignitaries, and I was representing Collingwood in the log sawing contest. Yep. And, well, I may have come last, but, and I may have been chastised more than once by the gentleman with the timer telling me to quit laughing. But it was a good afternoon, even in the rain. Yeah, I have all my fingers still. Yeah. I wanted to mention that today is the National Doctors Day, also National Physicians Day. And coming up next week on May 8th to 14th is National Nursing Week. And then lastly on May 19th is PSW Day. So we have lots of opportunities to celebrate the health professionals in our community. And please don't forget to say thank you. I also want to say thank you to our fire department and first responders who attended 3 times on Saturday to house fires in our town. Like, amazingly awful situation we had here on Saturday. So also a friendly reminder to check your smoke alarms. I'll say that this coming weekend is my next announcement. We are having our second annual Collingwood Chess Tournament. And this is a tournament that has the full support of the International Chess Federation and the Chess Federation of Canada. It's run just under the rules of those organizations. I had a look yesterday. Already over 50 people have signed up. I know that last year a number of children came. It's easier if you sign up this week. If you're still interested in attending, I think you save a bit of money. And I know the intent of Mr. Somborak, who's organizing this and putting his own personal funds into the $3,500 guaranteed prize fund, is hoping to put Collingwood on the map as a chess capital. Just stay tuned. And that's all I'm going to say today on that. Thank you. The next item on the agenda says deputations, but Pollinate Collingwood, they're actually going to speak to us at 4 o'clock in our next meeting. There are no reports or minutes of other committees or boards today. We do have a staff report. It's P 2023-12, the provincial legislative and regulatory changes around our planning legislation. And I believe that Manager Ayres will be addressing us on that. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. So this is the first of 2 planning reports being brought forward to Council for consideration and direction in response to proposed Bill 97 entitled Helping Homebuyers Protecting Tenants Act, which was announced by the province on April 6th of this year. Today's report focuses on the proposed legislative and regulatory changes and their associated Environmental Registry of Ontario, or ERO, postings. The second planning report, which is anticipated to be brought forward to Council on June 5th, will address the draft provincial planning statement, which is proposed to replace the current provincial policy statement and the growth plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Senior Planner Wukash, who is attending virtually, to provide a brief overview of the report. Thank you.
Welcome, Senior Planner Wukash. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and Manager Ayres for that introduction. The Ontario government continues to take action intended to address the province's housing crisis, aimed at reaching their goal of 1.5 million new homes constructed by 2031. So in early April, the government released a suite of policy and legislative changes to support the Housing Action Plan 2023 for feedback, with very short commenting windows on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. So Bill 97, called Helping Homebuyers Protecting Tenants Act, proposes to amend 7 existing acts with emphasis on the Planning Act, the Municipal Act, and the Residential Tenancies Act. And as Manager Ayres noted, this is the first of 2 reports, and to meet tight deadlines, this report is brought directly to Council and addresses the technical, legislative, and regulatory changes and focuses on the land use planning related matters. So that second report will come forward on June 5th, and it will summarize the more significant changes to the planning policy framework in Ontario, where the province has proposed to combine the current provincial policy statement, which we call the PPS, and the growth plan into one single province-wide policy framework called the Provincial Planning Statement. I guess, and that will remain to be called the PPS as well, along with implementing legislative changes. So those will have considerable impact on how the town manages growth in the long term, and it is the reason for the recent delay to the release of the draft 2 official plan for the town of Collingwood. So that's some context for this report, and I'll briefly describe the proposed legislative and regulatory changes that are coming forward to you today and our recommended comments. And please note that this staff report is recommended to be sent to the province as the town's comments on the first set of proposed Planning Act changes prior to the commenting deadline of May 5th. So that's the end of this week. The first one is about fee refund provisions. So the province proposes to delay the requirement for municipalities to refund zoning bylaw and site plan application fees so that it only applies to applications submitted after July 1st of this year. Initially, it was intended to be the beginning of this year. Staff support this action in recognition of the significant efforts being made to streamline planning processes and meet provincial targets for timing of approvals without financial penalty through the current development process and fees review being undertaken by the town. It also proposes to create a minister's regulation-making authority to exempt small and mid-sized municipalities from the fee refund provisions altogether. So staff recommend in their report that this exemption immediately apply to the town of Collingwood. The second big piece is regarding appeals to interim control bylaws. And these changes would allow appeals of an interim control bylaw at the time of initial passing, rather than only at the time of bylaw extension. So municipalities often use the interim control bylaw, which we call the ICBL for short, tool to address urgent or unexpected development challenges where further study is needed and a pause on related proposals is appropriate to protect the public interest. So ICBLs have been an effective tool for municipalities as demonstrated by the town recently relating to water capacity allocation. Previously, municipalities could enact an ICBL and be preserved from appeal for that first year in order to do the studies required, except for appeals by the minister. So introducing the potential for appeal both at the initial passing and the extension of an ICBL reduces the efficacy and nimbleness of that tool and would allow related development to continue until such appeals are resolved, potentially for years. Therefore, staff are unable to support this proposed change and recommend strengthening the tool rather than limiting it by allowing it to be used again within the 3-year period, provided it had a different purpose and effect. So the next change is regarding a new authority for ministers' zoning orders, which are also known as MZOs. The proposal is to provide the minister with the authority to exempt subsequent approvals, such as subdivisions and site plans, that would establish the uses permitted by an MZO from having to align with provincial policies or plans or local official plans. So this proposed amendment would bring the MZO tool into closer alignment with the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator tool, which requires that municipalities make the request for a zoning change. Staff encourage the province to consider eliminating the MZO tool in its entirety and rely instead on the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator, which has the benefit of clear guidelines, local control, public consultation, and the ability of the minister to impose conditions and require agreements, and provides more predictability and public interest safeguards than MZOs. And the final piece of change proposed in this initial Bill 97 is regarding site plan control regulatory amendments. So the tool that we know as site plan control has been evolving through the last several years through Bill 109, where council must delegate decisions on site plan control applications to staff, and Bill 23, which limited the scope of site plan control, now only applicable to residential developments with more than 10 units on a single lot. So through this proposed Bill 97, new regulatory powers are being proposed that would set out the conditions under which municipalities could continue to use site plan approval for development of less than 10 residential units. So those conditions are if the property is within 120 meters of a shoreline or within 300 meters of a railway line. So the town's approach to site plan control does achieve the goal of streamlining approvals for small scale residential development. The one exception is within the Pretty River flood fringe area, where it is considered necessary to apply site plan control to small residential projects to protect environmental and human health and safety matters and address floodproofing. So staff are supportive of site plan control being applied to small scale residential development in proximity to shoreline areas, provided that the definition of shoreline includes lakes, rivers, creeks, and navigable streams, and not just the Georgian Bay shoreline. And staff further suggests that the future regulation also encompass all floodplain and hazard lands delineated by the relevant conservation authority or municipality. And with respect to rail corridors, staff encourage the province to provide clarity in the regulation for parcels of land abutting rail lines that remain operational, rather than ones that have been closed. So that concludes my presentation today. We're available for any questions that you might have, and please stay tuned for the report in early June on the proposed provincial planning statement, which will have feedback on the more significant legislative changes that will affect land use planning in Ontario.
Okay, thank you very much for that summary. I'll read in the motion now. That staff report P2023-12, proposed provincial legislative and regulatory changes, proposed Bill 97 dated May 1, 2023 be received, and that council directs staff to submit report P2023-12 as the Town of Collingwood's formal comment to the Government of Ontario in response to the ERO postings 019-6821 and 019-6822, which describe in part proposed legislative and regulatory changes under Bill 97, which is known as Helping Homebuyers Protecting Tenants Act. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ring, Councillor Houston, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So through to you, to Senior Planner Wukosh. In reading the whole report, there were some areas where, I mean, I know we have such a short turnaround that we kind of took the position that if it didn't immediately impact planning, that we weren't going to take a position in our response. And one of the areas I had a concern with is the tenant rights portion. And I know that some of our residents are having a difficult time in terms of tenancies that are occurring, and they have not been paid for 2 years, and the tribunal's so far behind, and they can't manage their property, and or that it's even being kept in good repair. So I'm wondering if comments like that are appropriate through either you or another department in terms of addressing that for our citizens.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Jeffrey. Excellent point. We focused on the planning aspect of the legislation just because that's our area of expertise, and we have been sort of corresponding with the Affordable Housing Task Force on providing them opportunity to provide comment on some of the non-planning related matters. So our housing development coordinator has been in touch with them, and they will be providing some feedback on some of the future changes, but I'm not absolutely sure at this point about whether they've had an opportunity to digest the impact of the changes on the Tenancies Act to the current rental and landlord situation in Collingwood at this point. As we mentioned, the timelines of the comment periods are a month on this portion of the legislative changes, so it's very challenging for staff and committees of council or advisory committees to council to respond to the province in an effective way with such limited timeframes to digest and understand and look at the impact of the continuing evolution of legislation as it relates to these types of relationships. So difficult situation considering the timelines we have, and we're certainly flagging this right now as an opportunity for anyone in the community to provide comments to the province as well. The deadline on the Environmental Registry of Ontario closes on May 5th. So there is still some opportunity to provide feedback on some of the non-planning related matters in this proposed legislative suite of changes.
Thank you very much for that. Another question I had was with respect to freezing building code fees. I know we're going through a fee review right now with respect to planning, and just wondering if we need to be also doing the same. I just recognizing that every time we either increase fees, we're impacting the cost of housing. And do we have a good handle on what our costs are going? Understanding that we have to recover on our costs, but also understanding that we don't want to be inflating the price of the housing because it will get passed along to the buyers.
Would you like to address that too?
To either Manager Ayers or Senior Planner Rukash, whoever.
Yes, Manager Ayers, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Jeffrey. The development and process fees review is comprehensively looking at fees associated with planning, engineering, as well as building. So building services is participating in that process.
Yes, you.
Just briefly as well, the fees from building are very specifically directed toward that department, and there is actually a reserve that's required to be in place. So should building go up or down, and it provides a bit of a shock absorber to the amount that might come in one year and might not come in the next. So there's some regs around that as well, directing those fees appropriately.
Okay, thank you. I really want us to be aware of, and I know it's difficult with all these moving parts, but I always want us to be mindful of the end game and where we want to be placing ourselves. And another question that came up when I was looking at the timing of the change of fee refunds, does that change the department's mindset as to how we respond to the files specifically? If we know the ones are, well, we've got to refund that anyway, let's work on the current ones where we can prohibit some fees. Does that create, does there need to be some kind of comment on the maybe unattended consequences that would go with this kind of timing?
Manager Ayers, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Jeffrey. Sorry, my mic keeps going on and off. It is something we're certainly, again, looking at through that development and process fees review, and the implications of Bill 109, which is the refunding of fees, is top of mind as part of our ongoing discussions with the consulting team, understanding that that process begins July 1st. We have had a number of discussions over the last number of months, and we are looking at potentially really increasing focus on pre-consultation so that when we get formal Planning Act applications, they're that much further along than perhaps they have been in the past. So we are exploring opportunities through that project process to figure out how best to deal with it. But one of the other discussions we've had is that it will be through a request by the applicant to have the fees reduced. So there will be some onus put back on the applicants themselves to manage, from when an application is deemed complete to when they can start requesting fees. And, just having very general conversations with some of the consultants in the area, I get the impression that pursuing the fee refunds is not the top priority. It's getting their files actively managed. And so Again, I can't speak for everyone, but I think the intention is that, if it's being demonstrated that files are being diligently worked on and progressing in the right direction, we may not see as many requests come in. But again, that'll play out in time.
My last question, if I might, Mayor Hamlin, I was just wondering in terms of non-operational and operational railroad corridors, as a municipality, if we're planning going ahead, and those unoperational ones that now going forward, if you're going to be planning for passenger rail, it's really important not just to say, okay, they're unoperational and start planning in something that would prohibit us from being able to expand our transportation to and from Collingwood and eliminating that railroad corridor because it's not operational. And that would, require also input to the other owners. But anyway, it's a concern for me that we would start putting things too close if it became an opportunity for us going forward to have placement for passenger rail.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I'm going to dovetail on some of Councillor Jeffrey's comments because those are all areas that I was thinking about as well when I was going through this. The catch-22 situation of the fees. Similarly, the province's decision to announce they're going to push for 1,500,000 homes. Well, obviously, if you're going to be pushing the building of homes, it's going to put supply concerns in place, and is that going to ratchet up the cost? So it's a real balancing act as we try to go through. When we had the opportunity to sit with the county a couple of weeks ago, we brought up the rail corridor and specifically that question about is still being on the county's radar that railway right away needs to be maintained for what it was when we sold it to them, which was the opportunity may be there in the future. It'll be a long-term future probably, but it needs to always have that possibility there. And they assured us that it was still in their long-term transportation planning. And there will be an exercise that this new council will be going through over the next couple of years in regards to that long-term plan. And we'll continue to highlight the importance of that in the long range planning of the county. I also will say that we have a meeting on May the 10th with the Affordable Housing Task Force, and we'll specifically discuss that topic about the task force's opinions on some of those landlord tenancy situations that are existing. That's the nice thing about the makeup of the group. We have landlord representatives, we have tenant representatives. So we get the various but it's a good one. And when we do that, we'll make sure that council's aware of anything that the task force thinks is necessary to bring forward. The last comment I'd like to make, Mayor Hamlin, actually has to do a little bit with what one of the subjects was from the AMO representatives last week at the OSUM. They talked about the concern that municipalities in Ontario are being blamed for the housing crisis that Ontario has identified. I think it's always important to note that there's many approved subdivisions within most Ontario municipalities that haven't been completed, and those efforts have been made by all towards allowing supply to be put in place for various reasons. Then, and in no small way, the pandemic being one. The situation is now that we're in this situation, and we have to do something about it. And AMO accentuated that they also know Ontario municipalities will continue to make inroads into finding solutions, and that the association will assist along the way. So I wanted to note those things for the public. The report itself today, I'm supportive of. I don't have a lot of specific comments because there is going to be the other two stages. So I just wanted to I guess, bring those reflections at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines?
Thank you, Mary Hamlin. I just want to support and reinforce my support for the comments of Councillor Jeffrey and Deputy Mayor Fryer in regard to the railroad issue specifically, and ask to the planner and senior planner Wokosh that point about railway lines that remain operational, and I don't know how you phrase it, non-operational, to leave the door open for our future in that regard, I think is very necessary. And I would hate for this to be an opportunity for the province to presumably close the non-operational door of railway lines. It's a small point, but I think we should protect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question and I have a comment. I'll start with the comment just in terms of the incredible delay at the Ontario's residential tenancies tribunal. It's been atrocious and a hardship for landlords and tenants alike. But I did notice in the last few weeks, the province issued a news release saying they were hiring 40 additional adjudicators and 5 staff to try and get to their backlog. So I think they've acknowledged the problem. Let's keep our eye on what we see in our community, because maybe it's an issue independent of our comments on this bill, but there may be other ways that we can light a fire if necessary, because it is atrocious. My question for our senior planner is, in terms of the refund of fees if we don't process our applications fast enough. I did notice in the report that when the opportunity becomes available, you will be applying to be an exempt municipality from this requirement for various good reasons. But if we weren't successful, and whether it should be part of this comment, is it possible, and do we need to ask specifically, that pre-consultation could include things like peer review and third-party review? Because these are the things, as you've noted in your report, that we have to have, because we don't have hundreds of staff to do what we need outside consultants to do. So there's our peer review. And also, we have no control over other agencies that may be commenting. Can that be part of pre-consultation, or do we need to make a specific request at this time? Manager Ayers, did you want to answer that?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And yes, that is certainly part of the discussions we're having internally about what opportunities we have to, again, make our pre-consultation process even more comprehensive than it currently is. We've also had discussions about making sure we're collecting the appropriate fees. If we were, right now it's a relatively nominal fee, and if we were to increase the level of technical detail and review going into pre-consultation, we'd need to ensure that our fees are reflective of that. We have also started having conversations about potentially collecting contingency deposits, as we do with our formal Planning Act applications, at pre-consultation, to facilitate some of those peer reviews earlier on in the process. And we do have a few development files recently that have come in for pre-consultation, and those discussions are already happening with the applicants about getting certain studies done up front and getting them peer reviewed in advance of the formal applications coming in.
Well, good. That must make them happy as well. Speed all round. Okay, well, thank you for that. And if there's no other questions, we'll have a vote on this. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. There's one motion here, and I understand perhaps Councillor Jeffrey has another one, but we'll start with 9.1, and this has to do with the South Georgian Bay Mayors and CAOs Forum, terms of reference, and I'm going to turn this over to CEO Skinner. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. During the last term of council, it was actually Collingwood was one of the leaders in understanding that South Georgian Bay, we have a lot to be proud of and a lot to collaborate upon. And there was, I don't remember if it was a notice of motion or a staff brought forward a piece, but the mayor was very supportive of starting this group, as was council. And so the group got together, and the very first terms of reference for the group was written by our own Clerk Almus and presented to all the mayors and CAOs. So for South Georgian Bay, the areas that are engaged are the municipalities or townships or towns of Grey Highlands, Meaford, Clearview, the Blue Mountains, Wasaga Beach, and of course us. And the intention of this group is to have open discussions around where we can collaborate and how we can act better as a region that spans both two counties, so Grey County and Simcoe County, as well as the 6 or so municipalities. So the terms of reference has been tweaked a little here for this new term based on the input of the mayors and CAOs. But generally, the objectives talk about cross-boundary and regional issues, partnership opportunities, local, provincial, and federal matters impacting the region, and grant and funding opportunities. One very important item was the decision-making and authority. The idea here is not that any decisions that would normally be taken by the local or county councils would be taken by this group. The idea is to inform folks and then have them take items back to their local councils for the official decision-making. It's very collaborative. The chair changes each time we have a meeting, as does the note-taking, so that the various mayors or potentially even CAOs would host the piece each meeting. They're usually quarterly meetings unless there's a special reason to get together. And at the last discussion, there was actually an interesting thought about potentially getting a broader group together that includes the members of each council, maybe prior to a forum such as FCM or AMO, where there might be a desire to talk about some of the issues that collaboratively we'd like to propose as a region. Typically, the presentations by or attendance by guests or external stakeholders is discouraged. The idea is that if people need to talk to local councils, they should come to each of those local councils so that you can hear from leaders in the community directly. But there is now one of the new provisions, or I think the main new provision here is that upon 4 weeks' notice and asked by the sponsoring mayor and unanimous approval, there could be a conversation with someone from outside. And with that, that's lots of information about this. And should you endorse it today, I'm sure that this excellent forum will continue. And I think it's well worth the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I find this a particularly useful forum because we cross the county boundary. And sitting on County of Simcoe Council now, of course, I see the world ends at Collingwood, and there is nothing west of us, just so you know. So this forum, we can say, hey, there is something west of us, and maybe we have some things in common, and we need to talk more. And of course, we are on the boundary of 3 other municipalities who are part of this group, and we're growing into 2 of them on the east and west. So it only makes sense that we're doing this, and I'm finding it very helpful. And we'll see how it unfolds. So I should read in the motion, and we'll see if there's any questions. That council endorse the terms of reference for the South Georgian Bay Mayors and CAOs Forum. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Potts. Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I have 3 questions. With respect to number 4, Roman numeral subsection 6, with respect to declaring conflicts, the word expected is used. I would think in a format we would use the word required or shall. I don't think it should. You can expect yourself not to declare or to declare. I would recommend that change. Am I allowed to make changes to it? I mean, it has to go through all the others, but I just don't think it's reasonable in a municipal setting to say you're expected to. No, you're required to, or you shall.
What else? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Well, do you want to comment on that? Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would say that 2 things very briefly. Number 1, I'd be happy to provide a summary of any comments to the next chair and the next meeting. And secondly, as this isn't a decision-making forum, typically we don't have too much in the way of conflict of interest, but I think if there was anything that in this scenario did occur, it would make sense that people declared that in a municipal forum.
Thank you.
I think the very nature of a conflict is you influence decisions or input, and I think that would be at the root of advice to council, so I think it should be clear. And I was just curious about the communication. The CAO touched on it briefly in terms of coming back to councils, but if a decision's not unanimous and everybody's feeling differently within the forum, how does that roll out in this format? How does that communication piece?
Go ahead.
So we've had about a year and a quarter of practice in 4 or 5 meetings of the group to date, and it may be influenced by the new membership as we move forward. What has happened is that the folks have done 2 things. Number 1, become more informed about what their neighboring municipalities are thinking, and I think where there's consensus or where there isn't, that still is information that we can use to decide on our own priorities and where we might or might not want to move forward. The second thing is typically what will happen is there will be discussion about where we might want to go back to our respective councils and ask the councils to do something. One of the things that happened recently was there was a desire to ask the Ministry of Transportation and each of the municipalities to work together toward understanding if there would be a Highway 26 bypass around our area. It does involve several municipalities and the appropriate work to update that. So that was one where there was general consensus. It's yet to come up on your agenda, but it's one where had that not had general consensus, the agenda might have looked different when we came back. We'd be acting as simply the town as opposed to trying to collaborate across several municipalities. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say also, and because I'm still new to this, but if, I don't know, 5 municipalities thought, or 5 representatives of municipalities thought this is a really good idea, they'll take it back to their council and staff for input and decision making. And if the 6 didn't want to do it, oh well. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. Nobody can. It's not a level of government. It's really just for consultation and sharing ideas. And if a good idea comes out of it, those who want to run with it will. Yeah.
Well, then as a
That's my
follow-up to
take.
that comment
Yeah.
as well, even if our representative at the meeting doesn't think it's a good idea, would it still come back to us for council to have input as to whether they think it's a good idea or not as a whole for the municipality?
That's a good idea. Yeah.
I think it should come back either way.
I haven't seen any stringent votes, like are we in this or are we out of this? As our CEO said, it's been discussing of information. Like we had a sort of an informal, who's thinking about doing a municipal accommodation tax? Well, most of them were, but I don't think we're going to have a vote on that. Just to give you an example, right? Yeah. But I hear you. I think that's a good idea.
For that. And then finally, under number 6, it was just a simple question. If we were going to be doing some joint work together with experts, do we have a line item in our budget that would, how would that roll out in terms of our budget and costing to assist with initiatives generated out of that?
Over to you. I haven't got a clue.
Through the chair, the intention here would be that any expenditures would have to be okayed already in our budget. For example, if we went back to the same example about a technical study around a bypass, we'd have to talk to council about either an in-year change or most likely a 2024 budget item.
Yeah, I really feel that even though it seems to be a little more an informal process, I think if you're going to get to this level with the terms of reference, it needs to be tight enough that everybody understands the ground rules. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about that's no? Okay, I'll have a vote then. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Are there any other motions this afternoon? Councillor Jeffrey.
Mayor Hamlin, if this is the proper place to do this, I'd like to ask for notice to be waived for a motion. And what I'm going to ask for is that council direct staff to organize and donate in kind the cost for a celebratory parade for the All Ontario JHL champions, the Collingwood Blues, for the potential date of May 26, 23. And time is of the essence because they're going to be away and unable to organize this on their own. And the players come back for their final banquet on May 26th and won't be available to participate. I think it's a timing to have the players there. And so that's what it's about.
Okay, so firstly, we'll vote on waiving the time period for the notice of motion. Any comments on that? Seconder, thank you. Councillor Baines, thank you. All those in favor? Okay, you got your waiver. On to your notice.
Thank you. So I would move that council direct staff to organize and donate in kind the costs for a celebratory parade for the All Ontario JHL champions, the Collingwood Blues, for May 26, 23, or a date that's most convenient to the team.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Baines. Is there any comments around this? Questions? Councillor Ring?
Just, will the celebration be for what they've accomplished to date, or hopefully they come back with a national championship and we cancel it?
Through you, the very reason why this motion has been delayed to occur for May 26th is because a parade now, for what they've achieved so far, would bring closure and maybe not leave them so incentivized to bring that Centennial Cup back here. So, but with the time lines and the difficulty of the organization, it's done for May 26th so they can bring us both cups.
Just to follow up on, and I hope they do. I really do. But what happened in the old days where the fire truck would meet them as they come in from the on the bus trip home and pick them up, and it could be 2:00 in the morning like they did the year I won one.
Yeah.
That's sort of a nice idea.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
If I could, Mayor Hamlin.
Yes.
It's, I know my son's ridden on the fire truck a number of times with his All Ontario's, seems like probably 2 decades ago, but we can no longer have the players and participants riding on the fire trucks. Nothing to say a fire truck couldn't meet them and take them through town, but I'm pretty sure there wouldn't be a lot of people, depending on when they were coming in on a flight from Manitoba. And I just think the timing for the players is best for the 26th, and we can celebrate everything and them as great community citizens.
Okay, I had sorry, Councillor.
One more question
Yes.
through you to Councillor Jeffries. When you mean in kind, what would we need to do in kind? Like, I mean, obviously it's not a financial obligation, but what would be in kind that you?
A police, fire, whatever cost
okay.
they address with
Okay.
that. Yeah.
I have a question. Should this is perhaps to Clerk Thomas. Should the motion be reflecting consultation with the BIA? I'm presuming we don't know what the route will be, but not that they would affect it, but they could have consultation on how it would be organized. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any road closures, the notice gets circulated to the BIA for comment, so.
Okay, great, thank you. So we don't need to add that in? No, perfect. Okay, if there's no, CAO, go ahead.
I'm generally quite supportive of properly celebrating this type of achievement. That said, I think that there is a bit of a resource. We need to figure out what resources might need to be used to support it properly. So I think that some type of a limited report back from staff, so you're aware, what we're planning to do to make sure that we're properly prepared would be prudent.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It will be helpful for the community as well. Okay, I'll have a vote on this motion then. Oh, Councillor Baines, go ahead.
Just one thing, it strikes me that the citizens of Portage la Prairie, all 13,000 of them, are hosting some 8 teams at about 20 or so, 25 people per team. It is part of your challenge, if you will. Thank you to the people of Portage la Prairie. I think would be a nice addition. This is not related to this motion specifically, but it sort of is, because I'm looking at a town of 13,000 putting up that many visitors. I think is extraordinary, and I think we ought to send our thanks as well. So,
Okay, I'll do that. I actually have a thought around doing a little video with the challenge, so I'll include a thank you. Okay, now we'll vote. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Are there any other motions this afternoon? There's no bylaws. County report? Yes, go ahead, Deputy
Thank you, Mayor
Mayor.
Hamlin, and I did want to make some comments. I was thinking that we had a pretty decent timeline, and I wanted to talk about waste. We had a waste management update at our council meeting last week, and county staff provided an in-depth update report about waste collection for Simcoe County currently and in the future. There continues to be major success with the diversion efforts countywide, with Simcoe County continuing to hold down number 2 position for Ontario municipalities. So that's helped delay the closing of the landfill here in Collingwood, but likely will still occur at the end of 2023 because it'll be at capacity. Waste will then be transported to other Simcoe County sites, but even with that new truck traffic, one positive aspect of the closing is that the trucks which have been bringing in landfill waste will cease. So I got Simcoe County staff confirmation last week that it will net out to about 1,900 fewer trucks annually in the future, back and forth from the site. Another truck traffic related matter is being looked into by Simcoe County staff regarding the impact of half load restrictions. There have been some concerns brought forward about this for Collingwood in the spring, and there's been some review to see if the restrictions can be altered in any way. That 1,900 fewer trucks. It's waste management trucks actually are exempt from the half load rule. So there may be opportunities, because they've been traveling those half load roads. There may be opportunity for some rerouting that may help quite a bit through the next years when the truck traffic is going through and half load might be on. The other matter that was talked about last week that I wanted to speak about was the Simcoe County Hospital Alliance presented their annual update report in regards to Simcoe County Council's 2023 funding allocation report that was being considered that day. Detailed information was provided as annually required because of the transfer of care performance measurement review requirements. Again, for 2022, County Council agreed to waive any applicable reductions related to COVID-19 global pandemic impacts. While there was only confirmation of Simcoe County's $20 million commitment for a new general and marine hospital, so there wasn't any concern there. One detail that was presented was that although the ministry intends that 90% of capital costs are covered by the province, in reality, it can work out to about a 70%, 30% split because of the other aspects that have to be added in, the soft costs and such. So one of the discussions that we'll be careful to take forward with the county is keeping in mind that we'll do everything we can to assist our hospital efforts here to try to keep that level in the 90% range rather than getting down into the 70, because of course the rest would have to be handled through fundraising attempts. So I thought that was an interesting part of the report. And as with everything, all the county documents are available on the website if any councillor wanted to look at the reports in more specific detail. So those are the two that I wanted to bring forward today, Mayor Hamlin.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just add one thing, which is later this month, the county's going to embark on meetings with county councillors around strategic plan for the county. And we're going to have a couple of days set aside for that. So if you have any big thoughts about the county, and also we will come back to you at some point to tell you what we're talking about and see if it's worthy of a discussion here. But just so you know, that's also on the books for the next month or two. We have a consent agenda, and the motion before us is that the general consent agenda be herein received, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. There's 3, the Huntington Disease Awareness Month. And I'll just clarify, it's going to be from May 1 to May the 5th. What we have received is a request from the province that on the 6th, we have our towers illuminated green for the coronation of King Charles. All right, that's coming up. The second item is for Lupus Awareness Day, which is the clock tower illuminated purple on May the 10th. And for the Museum Month, the clock tower will be illuminated purple from May 18 to May 25 in support of the International Museum Day. Are there any comments on any of those? Councillor Baines?
It just occurred to me, Your Worship, that for the number of people that are passing by the clock tower on the main street, perhaps this already occurs, and I haven't noticed it, but some sort of little signage that says it's illuminated purple because it's such and such week or whatever. I don't know, something to put two and two together, is in the sense that it's a purple clock tower and it's such and such week or something to that effect.
I think we should pass this on to staff to think about, because as you said that, what I immediately pictured in my mind is some kind of information, public information board outside town hall on in the boulevard there, because you do see it in other communities. I don't mean in Ontario, but when you're traveling. How should we handle this? Do we need to have a request for staff to look into this? What do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
From a tracking perspective and accountability perspective, I think if there was a notice of motion that asked us to look at options to communicate what the colors are, it would give us some time to use our very creative minds and propose something that would be good for the community.
Would you like to so move?
Yes, since I opened my mouth on this. Yes.
We have a mover. Would we have a seconder? Councillor Perry, thank you. Any comments? No, we don't need to. We're not voting on it. We're just having a notice of motion. Right. We'll come up next time. Okay, we're good. All right, we don't have to vote on that. No. Okay, so council business. Under old or deferred business, we have Bylaw Enforcement 101, and we're going to hear from Manager Herod on this. Would he be online?
Yes, I can do it.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. We do have Acting Manager Adam Herod here to present the item that was actually deferred from early in April. We have been doing a comprehensive training program with all members of council for all of the various departments and divisions within the town of Collingwood. And this is your Bylaw 101 update.
Okay, thank you.
So good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and members of the public. Thank you for having me here this afternoon to provide you an opportunity to present information on bylaw enforcement, as well as a division update. So for today's presentation, there's kind of two parts, and it's broken up into two different parts. The first part is more of an overview of the bylaw enforcement system, just in general, as well as specific to Collingwood. And the second part is kind of a review of bylaw enforcement stats specific to Collingwood. Next slide, please. So the purpose of municipal bylaws is to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of residents and visitors within a community. Bylaws can be used to regulate or prohibit certain activities. They can be used to require persons to do certain things, and they can also be used to provide a system of licenses. In Collingwood, we have a number of municipal bylaws, I think over 40 bylaws. And everything that starting from animal control right up to zoning and everything in between. So we have a bylaw for noise, we have a bylaw for property standards, parking, etc. And by creating and enforcing bylaws, we can help that Collingwood remains a great place to live, work, and play. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of shows the Canadian legal hierarchy within Canada with the constitutional law on top and policies down at the very bottom. As you may know, municipalities have to pass bylaws that don't contravene or offend provincial statutes, the Human Rights Code, or the Constitution, and any bylaws that we do pass have to be authorized by provincial statutes. And most of the town's authority to pass bylaws comes from the Municipal Act specifically. So for example, the town can't pass a bylaw, like a power of entry bylaw, to allow enforcement staff to enter into a dwelling unit. This would potentially, this would contravene or contradict the Municipal Act and would also offend Section 8 of the Charter. Next slide, please. So council and the bylaw enforcement system. So even though council establishes the overall policies for enforcement, they enact bylaws and set service levels. Council members should not get involved in the daily enforcement activities. Individual enforcement decisions are to be made by enforcement staff. If council members get involved in the daily operations, they can cause an influence on the enforcement process. And there is a code of conduct, there is case law, and there's also policy on this as well. Enforcement staff have a duty to enforce various laws, and they may exercise discretion, including the discretion to write a ticket or to pursue or not to continue to pursue an investigation. And this is based on several factors, some of which are laid out in the town's bylaw enforcement policy. By maintaining the separation between council enforcement staff, we're ensuring that the bylaw enforcement system remains a fair system. And so certainly council can support their constituents by directing them to call the appropriate departments or staff. And I'll go further into some of these details later on. Next slide, please. So what we do, some people may not know this, but we educate the public on bylaws through outreach and community efforts. So this could be simply visiting a property as a result of a complaint. This could be being out at the farmers market. Just last year we had a booth at the farmers market, and we were promoting the town's short-term accommodation review. We also conduct proactive patrols of public spaces. This does include areas like parks and trails and school zones. Sometimes it's difficult to patrol public spaces when we don't have a full complement of staff. With the addition of our seasonal officers, they're out more often on the trails, interacting with the public and making sure the public's aware of the various bylaws. We also conduct investigations into alleged complaints. So if somebody contacts the bylaw department and believes that their neighbor is contravening bylaw, we would launch an investigation. We also enforce and prosecute bylaw offenses and some provincial statutes. One of the more commonly provincial statutes that we enforce within the division is the Dog Owners Liability Act. And enforcement doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is going to get a ticket. There can be a range, or there is a range of tools that the bylaw services division or the officers do use. This could be kind of everything from just a pamphlet on noise. Maybe the individual has to obtain a license, and it may kind of escalate from there, including issuing a notice or order, and kind of at the top end would be charges. This could be a ticket, or it could be a summons to court. We also collaborate with other regulatory agencies. So the Health Unit, the Ministry of Environment, just to name a couple, as well as the OPP. We liaise with other town departments and external agencies on a variety of topics. and some of the external agencies specifically that we interact with quite a bit, the Georgian Triangle Humane Society. Simcoe County Housing is another agency that we interact with quite a bit. We're also responsible for developing policies and procedures relating to bylaw enforcement. And finally, we manage and administer various programs and plans, and again, some of which I will be covering later on. Next slide, please. Some of the other duties and responsibilities. The bylaw staff are on call 24/7 for animal control response. And so this is to do with like picking up a stray dog. If somebody has found a dog that has been lost, they can contact the town 24/7, and an officer will respond to pick up and house the dog until the owner can come forward. We also manage the crossing guard program, including providing backup coverage when the part-time crossing guards are unable to make their shift. As it stands right now, actually, unfortunately, we don't have any spare guards, so any coverage that is needed is assigned to bylaw until we can find the individuals that can potentially fill these positions. So if anyone's interested in becoming a spare crossing guard, we have an opportunity up right now. We're also responsible for parking meter repair and coin collection. So this is within the downtown as well as our waterfront meters. And we also assist other divisions and departments with their POA, provincial offense prosecutions. This does include serving summonses and notices on behalf of other divisions and departments. So this could be a water notice that we're delivering to somebody that's in arrears. So we do assist with those activities as well. When we talk about the town's parking program, we're talking about all the administrative duties that are part of that. So this includes sending out various letters, scheduling court appearances, and everything in between, which would include facilitating first attendance. And finally, we're also responsible for training private enforcement officers, which again is part of the town's private property parking program, which I will touch on later, as well as training and hiring new crossing guards, including monitoring their performance. Next slide, please.
5 slides in this deck. They have been circulated. They have been posted publicly since the report that was presented or prepared for the earlier meeting this month. So there is a number of duties that bylaw is not responsible for as well. So that includes the building code complaints, waste management, as that's a county function. We're lucky in Simcoe County to have that. There's a number of other issues that we've outlined here, including pest control, speeding, noisy mufflers, resolving civil disputes, which comes up actually quite regularly. And we have to explain to residents the difference between a civil dispute and the concerns that they've raised. If we also don't get in the middle of landlord and tenant disputes. And the next slide is quite important as well for citizen inquiries and complaints. Actually, we had this clarified too, and thankfully our manager of customer service has this well under control. The question came up about after hours calls and ensuring that the appropriate department is contacted whenever the the phone lines aren't answered during regular business hours. And it has been confirmed that the call tree, whenever you phone into Town Hall, has been recently updated to indicate that urgent issues, they are brought to the very first of the call tree. Obviously, if it relates to fire, EMS, or police, they are diverted to 911. But it specifically asked after hours whether it's a bylaw related issue or whether it's water, wastewater, or public works and roads related. So we do have the opportunity, if you phone into that regular line after hours, to get direct response as the information goes to the individuals that are on call. It should also be noted there too that council members for policy related questions to call or email myself and obviously see the CAO in accordance with our council staff relation policy. Complainant information is our next slide. So this is quite important, as this is what's required should matters have to proceed to charges or prosecution. It is very important for the public to be fully aware that any complaints that we receive regarding various property owners, that we do not attend properties and indicate who filed a complaint. As much as an individual may believe that that a bylaw officer has told their neighbor that it was them, most neighbors ascertain that it is the neighbor. We do not confirm whether it was a neighbor or how the response was received. However, the one exception is if a complainant observes an offense that a bylaw officer cannot see, and it does have to go to court and be prosecuted, obviously we'll need that individual to be a witness. So that's the only time when it becomes evident on who was filed the original complaint. The hours of operation for the bylaw division are identified here. So as you're fully aware, during the summer warmer weather months, we operate 7 days a week. We do have limited Saturdays through the fall, and then through the winter, it's Monday to Friday, plus the overnight parking that we conduct. The bylaw stats, I'll have Adam get into some of these bylaw statistics and the bylaw service division structure. And I should note too that Adam is not here present today because I caught him a little off guard advising him that was deferred to today's meeting, and he's also training all of our seasonal staff today. So I'll let you quickly go through some of this, Adam.
Thank you, Clerk Elmis. Very quickly, bylaw, this is essentially the structure. We have 2 administrative staff, myself and Amanda Phone, who's the town's licensing and compliance officer. We have 4 field officers, and then we have our seasonal and crossing guards. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights for 2022, and this was already put in the business plan in 2023, so I won't go over it in too much detail, but those are some of the activities that we have completed in 2022. And just as a kind of an update, one of the activities was downtown parking, the RFQ. So that was awarded, and new downtown meters are expected to be installed next week. So next slide, please. So these are kind of the top 10 bylaw complaints that we receive. The ones that are highlighted in red just kind of show an increase in 2022 compared to 2021. So we've seen an increase in 4 different areas, a substantial increase in the number of long grass and weed complaints. And although parking does appear that it has gone down substantially, we use a different system for tracking parking matters, so that's why there is such a large variance there. Next slide, please. So just kind of a 2022 bylaw stats overview. So there were over 2,000 complaints in 2022, and there's most of them were complaints. There were almost 400 inquiries, number of patrols 125, 57 proactive. So what I can say about this is they're just with the staff that we have right now, a lot of proactive, we're not able to do proactive enforcement, which we would we'd love to do a lot more, be out there engaging with the public a lot more, but it's just not practical. Number of inspections conducted as well, over 1,600 inspections. And majority of the cases in 2022 were closed. There were some cases that were carried over. Next slide, please. So this slide just kind of goes over cases per year and kind of the cases per officer, and this is based on kind of 4 officers. So as you can see, in 2023, for example, we had about 320 cases per officer, and this is substantially increased with the volume of calls, or the number of calls that we're receiving. There was a slight increase, or sorry, decrease in 2022 and 2023, and this was because of COVID. We weren't enforcing COVID-related enforcement, so they're still higher than we would like, which is putting pressure on the department. And kind of the final slide there is 8. So that would just show, like, if we had 8 officers in 2020 or 2030, with the expected population, we would see like a caseload of about 450 calls per officer. Next slide, please. Again, this just shows kind of the trend of bylaw enforcement occurrences and the upward trend that we're seeing. Next slide. So again, this was covered in the 2023 financial report, so I won't go over these in too much detail. We just for parking revenue for 2022 with our additional seasonal officers, the parking department was able to generate over $750,000, and this was based on tickets, parking, permits, and so on. Next slide. Just some stats for animal control. 356 animal related occurrences in 2022. In 2022 we sold about 986 dog tags, and 32 of those were plus 32 lifetime tags. On the next slide, it does go over kind of this downward trend, the number of animal licenses per year. So if you want to go to the next slide. It just kind of provides a bit of an overview, and you can see over the last few years, especially, we've seen a decrease in the number of tags, but this isn't good because we obviously have people moving into the community that presumably have dogs. So unfortunately, we just don't have the ability to do a lot of proactive work for this. Next slide. This is kind of a slide that outlines some of the provincial offense prosecution work that has been done within our department. First attendance, which is something that we would facilitate before like a parking ticket goes to trial. We dealt with 127 of those. We saw we saw a number of Provincial Offense Act prosecutions taking place, and a number of bylaw offenses also within that area. Next slide, please. Town has 9 crossing guards serving 5 different schools. The bylaw department is responsible for providing coverage when we don't have spare guards. Last year, we spent just covering crossing shifts, about 96 hours just covering crossing shifts. And although it does say we hired one crossing guard, we did end up losing a crossing guard this year. So we're back to square one. Next slide, please. So this is the private property parking enforcement program, just some stats on it. So different private property owners can enroll in this program, and we've seen an increase in the number of businesses or properties registering within that program. And part of this program does allow for the appointment of private enforcement officers who would be able to issue tickets on private property. without bylaw enforcement. So they go through a training program that they would allow them to issue tickets. Next slide, please. Some of the challenges, number of calls for service has been a real challenge. Complexity of bylaw cases. There's a lot more to bylaw than just parking and animal control. More regulations. These could be bylaw or provincial regulations. There's been a reduction in revenue from court closures and so on. And just we've definitely seen the need for support services for development of various policies such as short-term accommodations. And obviously another challenge is just recruitment and retention of staff, including crossing guards. Next slide, please. And this kind of wraps up my slide. And by all means, if you have any questions at the end, feel free to ask. But some of the priorities for 2023, report back to council. This is actually happening this month with a draft bylaw and framework for governing short-term accommodations, taxi licensing review, and continuing to update various bylaws such as long grass and weeds and parking. We're also doing a bylaw service review. Part of that would potentially look at implementation of an administrative monetary penalty system. Downtown parking meter replacement, which I indicated we're getting some new meters starting next week. And we always look for innovative approaches to serve our residents. So that concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, by all means.
Thank you very much. Would there be any questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I don't think they'll be specific to Acting Manager Herod, but they are all, I had them for other business and they're all bylaw related actually. So I think this is probably an appropriate place, if anywhere, to do it. I had a request from residents regarding the noise from, I guess it's HVAC or whatever that unit is at the Monaco building, and knowing that we've had a court date. I was wondering if the clerk could give an update because I have had feedback still, further complaints that whatever mitigation attempts have been made thus far are not making a difference for them. So I was just wondering if the clerk could give us an update on that, please.
Go ahead, Clerk Thomas.
Thank you, Your Worship, to address a question. Actually, Manager Hayter and myself were chatting about this at the end of last week. So I'd just like to confirm that there was an initial court hearing that was held in March, and it has been put over until June to allow for disclosure. So bylaw staff are continuing to put together the requisite documents to provide to the Monaco development and their property management, or their development group, I guess it is, regarding the information, the complaints that have been received. So if anybody still has complaints, we need you to be proactive in ensuring that bylaw staff are aware that the issues carry on. We may be required to look at acquiring an acoustical engineer to even proceed with charges. But if we don't hear from the public that it's still an issue, that would be a concern that we would have moving forward. Bylaw staff would actually talk to the witnesses that we do have witness statements for prior to proceeding, but if the public is aware, let us know as soon as possible.
Clerk Thomas, I'll pass it along to the people who are in touch with me as well. The next one is with regard to the short-term accommodations. And I was wondering, have we done a general mailing recently, or would these letters, I had 3 property owners come to me who had received letters regarding short-term accommodation and basically suggesting that they were operating one, but there was really no follow-up or recourse. And the one very specifically is operating a legal short-term accommodation. And they were just wondering whether it was a complaint-based, these letters, or whether we did send out a general mailing. And that's all I really need to know, is if we actually do general mailings to properties or if they're all complaint-based.
Thank you. Clerk Thomas?
Currently, they have been complaint-based.
So
Sorry if I may, I can just elaborate on that a little bit more. So just recently we received about, I think it was 40 complaints about various STAs. So the bylaw department acted on those complaints, sent out various notices, and some of those notices did say if you did receive this and you are operating like a bed and breakfast, to contact the bylaw office to discuss. So we have had some residents contact us and discuss their specific concerns.
Thank you. And then the last with respect to bylaws is the backflow prevention bylaw. And I'm getting a lot of negative feedback from some businesses regarding our recent added responsibility to businesses to have an accredited person complete a survey for the town of Collingwood. And we already are requiring them to pay a plumber to do an annual inspection, and then we charge them to do their process with us for $50. And now we're adding another responsibility in the middle. And I guess my question through to staff would be, is this a reasonable request of businesses, particularly those that are marginalized in operations, but are already fulfilling their obligations in terms of an annual inspection by a professional?
Joe Skinner, would you like to address that?
Through the chair, yes, the director may not be available right at the moment to comment, but I know that a review of this particular bylaw is on the plan for this year, and it's actively under review. I am surprised that there's an accredited person requirement beyond the plumber, because I thought that was the accredited person.
Sorry, through you. I didn't mean to suggest that, but they have to pay the plumber yet again. They've already paid the plumber to come in and inspect, and they've got to pay them again to file paperwork with the town. And just seems to the people I'm hearing from to be excessive in their responsibility.
Go ahead.
Yeah, happy to take this back, and in fact, it's already in flight. And I know that there are some people from a few corners who've asked about it. It is an important piece as far as drinking water quality and risks. However, we do need to find that point where it's the fine point where the risk is worth the effort for our valued businesses. So thank you for raising that.
And I have other business, but if there's someone who has questions specific to the bylaw part, I will wait.
Yeah, okay, that would be great. Yes, Councillor Baines.
Through you, thank you, Mayor Hamlin, to Manager Herod. I gather or should I say a decimeter and a radar gun tools of your trade in regard to speeding and or loud, noisy, muffler-less cars.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you. Through your worship, to Councillor Baines. So again, if it's vehicles with loud mufflers, unfortunately, that would be a Highway Traffic Act matter that the OPP would have to address. If people are working at their homes, for example, and revving their engines, that would be a bylaw, so a non-moving violation, for example. And it's not based on any decibel readings. It's based on reasonableness. So it's very subjective. So it may disturb one resident, but it may not disturb all of the residents living on that street.
Vacation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey.
Specific to that, Mayor Hamlin, through to Councillor Baines, I've received a lot of those complaints in the past couple of years, and I did bring it to Police Services Board. And so Detachment Commander Litcherson has it on his radar, if you will.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one question about the dog tag issue, which I describe as an issue because it's looking like there's anywhere between 300 and 500 dogs that don't have tags, if I'm guessing. And I'm just wondering, given the revenue and the time of year, which is probably the summer when we can see most dogs out and about, would this be a matter we could consider through budget, I guess, of having summer students be out and about tagging or encouraging people to go to town hall to get their tags. Yeah, Clerk Gomez?
Certainly, I don't know if Manager Harrod wants to address that question, but it's something that our seasonal officers don't only enforce parking, they do enforce a number of other bylaws. And I do believe that they pay attention to dogs off leash and tagging as well.
Okay. And as a resident with a dog, if I could just register that the new tags for this year are so noisy. Yes, Councillor Bain's agreeing. My dog, I can hear him like in the middle of the night even. It's a thing. So I'll just leave that thought with you. If the old tags, I didn't hear them once. Okay, so that's, thank you very much, Manager Harrod, for that. Very much appreciated. Okay, the next item would be other business, and we have Manager Ayres who's going to provide us with an Ontario Land Tribunal update. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This will be a very brief update regarding 3 active appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal that staff and the town solicitor are currently working on. With respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for 452 Raglan Street, the appeal by Eden Oak Raglan Inc. for non-decision remains scheduled for a hearing in July of this year. A revised submission from the appellant was received in March and is currently under technical review by staff, the town's retained planning consultant, external commenting agencies, and third-party peer reviewers. The OLT appeal by Consulate Developments Ontario Inc. for non-decision regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for the proposed Bridgewater on Georgian Bay development remains scheduled for a hearing beginning on May 17th of this month. And as CAO Skinner noted in her update to council last week regarding water capacity in the land use planning study, the appeal of zoning bylaw number 2022-007 by Sunvale Homes has settled pursuant to council direction. So the only one appeal by Crest Point Blue Mountain Inc. remains at this time. And this concludes my update this evening or this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And then over to, are there any specific questions about that? No, good. And then the next item is over to our clerk, and she may have 2 items to speak to. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. I do have 2 items I wanted to speak to. The first one is related to our new governance structure. So today is our first day of our council and committee of the whole structure being put forward. And within the provisions of the procedural bylaw changes that implemented this, noting that it was for a pilot period, we still do need to conduct an election of the chair for the committee of the whole. It was identified that it could be a rotating chair. Once appointed, the chair would be in place for a year. They could be appointed for 1 additional term, depending on council's wishes. And for the first meeting, we have had our agenda review with Mayor Hamlin. And so our thoughts are proceeding with Mayor Hamlin as the chair for the committee of the whole that's following this meeting. And then we will be polling all of council seeking any interest in the position of chair for May the 15th. And all of those that are interested in that position, number 1, you could be nominated. You can nominate yourself or express your own interest. But we would like to offer you the opportunity of attending an agenda review collectively. So if there is, as long as we don't have more than 5 individuals interested in chairing the committee of the whole, we'd actually open up our agenda review meetings with whoever's interested, so you understand the conversation and preparation for meetings that the CAO and myself conduct with the chairs for the various committees. The next item I just wanted to note was regarding the committee of the whole and timing. Moving forward, we would like to have carry on council consistently with committee of the whole, and after a 2.5 hour there would be a break for approximately half an hour before we proceed. So some meetings, we may have a council meeting that may only last an hour long. So we would go immediately into committee of the whole. 4:30, we would recess for half an hour and then carry on at 5 o'clock. And I think that's basically the items that I wanted to address today.
Okay, thank you very much. Other business, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So first, I missed notice of motion. So I'd just like to give notice, there's no rush with this, is that Collingwood participate in commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that would be in December, but I have a full package as a member of UCLG globally as to media suggestions for ways to commemorate. And I'm pleased to provide that if council supports it. So that's notice for that. And then just to ask you, my FCM board meeting was in March, and I've been trying to give updates, but we never have time. Is it appropriate to do that report in committee of the whole? That would be a question through the clerk. If so, then I won't jam us for time right now. Or should I just speak fast?
Yeah, why don't we wait till the next meeting? Because I think people are now gathering and,
Sure. And,
okay,
And
that's
one
great.
other, sorry. I
Yeah,
had
go
a
ahead.
lot. Councillor Houston and I have been having conversations on and off about investigating the vacant property tax. And I know Toronto's done it, Blue Mountains had considered it. And I was wondering anyway, and he may support about asking about referring that to the Affordable Housing Task Force for their input, because that would be my specific interest in providing the funds or revenue from that toward affordable housing initiatives and maybe loosening up some of our inventory. But I would like to hear from them first before I.
Okay, so is that a motion you're bringing? Okay.
Clerk may just say it's okay just to send it through to them to consider.
Yeah, go ahead, Clerk Gomez.
Certainly, thank you, Worship. Yes, if any member has any item that they want addressed by a committee or a task force, you're welcome to advise generally the staff resource and or I shouldn't say and or, and the chair for items that you'd like them to consider on the agenda. And you're also welcome to depute at various meetings as well, should you wish to attend.
That's okay.
Thank you. Other business? Councillor Perry.
Well, I apologize. I probably should have got this in community announcements, but I just got an email from my daughter after I did my community announcement. She works for Township at Clearview, but I just want to acknowledge that it's International Municipal Clerks Week.
Oh, really?
So I would like to acknowledge Clerk Almus and Deputy Clerk Dahl for their hard work and dedication.
Yay, thank you. That is very good other business. Okay, so if there is no other business, we have a confirmatory bylaw, that bylaw number 2023-050, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held May 1, 2023, be enacted and passed this first day of May 2023. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Potts and Councillor Houston. CO? Yeah.
Before we finish this meeting, I'm wondering if the folks who've arrived may potentially be from the Pollinator group, and that was on the agenda originally for this meeting. If at your discretion, may be better to include that update in this meeting, and or take a break and the next one just before you had made the final decision. I'll leave it to you.
Well, is there any feeling of the group one way or the other? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I think it could be a little bit of time. I'm really interested in hearing their thoughts on the No More May and those types of things. So my preference would be, if it's okay with them, that we just move into committee of the whole.
Can we take
or
a
have short
5-minute
break.
break? I think we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and hear our deputation, because you're all here ready to go, and then we'll take a break before we get into the committee of the whole meeting. Okay, great. See you in 5 minutes. Thank you. No, we're just having a break, recess for 5 minutes, and then we're coming back. Pollinate Collingwood was on the agenda for a deputation, but it turned out 4 o'clock, they couldn't make a 4 o'clock time. But now they're here, and so the thought is maybe we'll just add them into this meeting. They were originally going to be in. so they don't have to wait while we have a break. Okay, so we'll just have a 5-minute recess and we'll see you back here. Good, okay. Hi, Council, we'll just finish our recess, and we'll now go to the finish of our meeting that started at 2 o'clock, our council meeting. One of the items on that agenda was a deputation, and Pollinate Collingwood, who's going to do that deputation, is here now. So if they could come up to the podium, please.
Have a slide deck? We do have a slide.
It'll be coming up shortly. There we
Wonderful.
go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. So my name
Okay.
is Carolyn Davies. I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
I'm Jessica Lehr.
And my name's Jeff Young.
And we have two more of us often with us, Shannon McCready and Carrington Lozon, who are not joining us today, but very much a part of our team.
We are all community volunteers that are part of Pollinate Collingwood that you've heard of before. Next slide, please. I'm not used to these things. So I just want to say thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk and to share a little bit of what we've done this past year and talk about our upcoming plans for the 2023 engagement opportunities in town. So in 2021, at the start of that year, we decided to really focus on what our strategic goals were over the course of 5 years. And those really were to connect with the generous donations that we've received from Julie DiLorenzo and to strategize how we can best sort of do our work. So habitat stewardship was certainly number one on our list, and making sure that there's habitat creation opportunities across the town to benefit native pollinators. The other one is education and outreach, because we really do think that not only within the community, but also within the schools, there are opportunities for lots of learning, and everyone, we all admit that we're all learning as well. Municipal policy is an important part of our strategy as well. We'd like to help to push forward some changes within how the town is run with regards to supporting native pollinators. The fourth thing that we decided to come up with was called our Pollinate Network, and that was to help support some of our neighboring sort of communities on how they can have, I guess, groups like ours within their community to help support these initiatives going forward. So it really is having Collingwood step up as a leader in this. And then the last one is for development and governance as a new sort of not even a nonprofit organization. We're just grassroots at this point. How do we sort of strategize on how we're developing future initiatives, opportunities in terms of funding, and then how are we organizing ourselves and governing our body? So just trying to think about the long-term goals here. For our 2022 review, we're going to bring up Jeff for this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, you already did it. Great. So I'll go through our habitat stewardship. So in 2022, we planted about 1,250 square feet of native garden space. So you've seen some of those throughout the town. And in those 426 plants, including perennials and shrubs. I'm not sure, is Forbes? Forbes. Okay, sorry, and Forbes. 205, Oh, grasses. Okay, gotcha. 205 free native plants we handed out, 360 packages of seeds. We just with people who organized mostly within our Facebook group, we joined with them to form our Sit a Sprout program. So that was, we give them seeds and kind of everything to grow the plant. And then in the spring, they would pass it off to us, and then we would plant it in some of the gardens. And then in 2000, we also just managed the sites that we already built in 2020 and 2021. Next slide. For education outreach, we did 5 blogs and articles. We also participated in 11 community and special interest groups, reaching about 604 individuals. We donated 5 books to the Collingwood Public Library. Our digital presence on Facebook and Instagram is growing every year. It's a big part of our group, and I think our Facebook group especially, a lot of people come to join there and just learn about what we're doing. A lot of, can you identify this plant, which can become interesting. We also were invited to a few events, the Collingwood Garden Club Earth Day event and Be the Change film series. We also have a website that we ensure is up to date and helps people educate just when they're looking for types of species, where can they get them locally, and other relevant content. Next slide, please. To continue, we participated in the Pollinator Week. We created and provided support for the Bees and Trees Canopy program. We also provide information for those. So just at nurseries, we actually work with them on ensuring they displayed some of the native plants in proper places. So when people arrive, they actually know what they're looking for. We also support the Collingwood Museum's Royal Botanical Gardens traveling display and initiated a Kill Your Grass RIP Lawn campaign, which was just, it's kind of a small campaign, which is putting a fresh garden over your lawn instead. Next slide, please. For municipal policy, we collaborated with the BC Canada certification. We supported the town with the pollinator protection plan. Any questions or anything the town staff needed, we helped as well. We provided an overview of work to date for the Community and Corporate Services Standing Committee in spring. Native plants provided community food and garden support. We also provided details for the town pollinator map so people could see online where the gardens are. Next slide, please. So the Pollinate Network, we, as Killian touched on earlier, we try to engage other communities to build similar organizations. Just where those native plant nurseries are and where they can purchase them. A national level pollinator protection groups, designed and co-planted gardens with the Collingwood Garden Club. Provided support for other local interest groups, including Barrie, Town of Blue Mountains, and Creemore. Free education, plants, and seeds at local NGO events, and scientific knowledge stewardship connections with CCAT, as well as Simcoe County, which we talked about earlier. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. And continue to work towards expanding our community volunteer base and capacity. We evaluate success and expanding initiatives that align with the Pollinator Collingwood 5-year strategy. And we're also tracking and measuring to ensure success with volunteer hours, budget, public interactions, garden site information, presentations, and media articles. And we've also held 6 meetings to date just to discuss priorities and where we're going to go directionally this year. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I'll pass this over to Jess.
And yeah, we switched. So that was back last year with 2022, 6 meetings. We've already had 2 this year. So it's ongoing, not necessarily monthly, but as demand needs. And obviously we're heading into growing season. So we pick up our meeting time. So habitat stewardship. One thing with a lot of the sites, most are on town. However, there are residential and sites on business areas as well. But just once they go in, we don't leave them. We do communicate to check to see if there's new plants that need to be added, say some weren't successful, communicating with the town. If we're in a drought, we need to add more water, that sort of thing. We already have a couple of new projects this year. I've already worked with the YMCA planting seeds for their new garden, of which they did receive a grant through the town somehow for that. I've engaged with the Labyrinth and Barbara Whiterhouse as a shared garden with the Horticultural Society as well. And we have a woman who's ready to donate a canoe. So part of David Suzuki Foundation, one of those national organizations that we engage with, it's kind of trendy to plant in a canoe, of which we do have one down at Sunset Point, and we have now a second one we can plant in, so we have to find a site for that. And similar to Kill Your Grass, Rest in Peace, already engaging again a grass to pollinator patch program. We will provide 3 grants of $150 each with both the spring plant and the fall plant. So it's all about getting plants in the ground and educating people. And that leads me into the education and outreach. So Earth Day, what an amazing success. I couldn't tell you, several hundred people easily. So right there, tying in with other local organizations. We have a talk coming up with the Southern Georgian Bay Community Health Center for one of their green prescription talks. Pollinator Week, in talks with the library about a panel talk over at Simcoe Theatre potentially with the gardening groups across town, whether it be food or ourselves and so on, and already with See the Salmon Run. Part of the Pollinator Week fulfills some of the Bee City Canada requirements as well. For part of that application, you have to provide education, especially around that date. Educational blogs and all the rest, which Jeff touched on, we continue forth. So supporting the town with Bees Plus Trees. We'll purchase another set of library books, new ones again, across more topics so that anybody as they go along the way can have those resources to engage with. We're also in the middle of designing some small new habitat signs, as well as some larger ones for the Learning Garden by the Simcoe Theatre as well. So we were printing on Coroplast. We're trying to move away from plastic, and it would just be a simple habitat sign that explains what the garden is doing. So just engages more in people looking for us. Next slide, please. Municipal policy, we submitted the application again, recertification, and worked with the town and other local ENGOs for that Bee City Canada application. And we'll continue to engage with Dean, Wendy, and Nicole Yardy and everybody else for the pollinator protection plan. Pollinate network. This one is such an amazing one, and Jeff sort of touched on it, and Carolyn. There is now, after we began, a Pollinate berry. There is also now a Pollinate Town of Blue Mountains and a Pollinate Owen Sound. None of that existed before Pollinate Collingwood. So this is growing. It's absolutely amazing. And this connection between all is really, really important. Like I end up sitting on the phone with Town of Blue Mountains. They're like, hey, how's it going? What are your strategies? How's it going here? And so we have this amazing opportunity both to learn as ENGOs, but also for municipalities to engage and work together, knowing that there's this large movement underway. And then collaborate with environmental groups, which we've touched on. One that spoke about very quickly back here was CCAT was talking about moving the leaf litter pickup later in the season, which falls into Simcoe County. So that's, again, bigger than us, but CCAT with their waste management brought that forth, and we were able to provide some scientific reasoning and links to other stewardship organizations. So you've got this sub-level functioning going on, which is absolutely amazing. Development and governments, again, Jeff touched on that one, and Carolyn, that's tracking our hours, which is absolutely amazing. And the fact in 2 years, we now have 3,500 square feet of new pollinator habitat. And that's not even counting our first year. So we're now entering our fourth year really of doing this. So it's pretty fantastic. I feel like we're in an amazing community with amazing support. So thank you all. Next slide. I think that's it for the Pollinate Collingwood. As a request, we are going to touch on the Save the Stems movement, no mo may. But is there any questions related to sort of who we are, what we've been doing, and where we're headed before? Because that's sort of a whole nother topic.
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Or did you have a question? Yeah, Councillor Ring would like to ask one. Go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment about Earth Day. I was at your presentation at the library a few months ago, and it was very, very well done, and I agree with you that the Earth Day was well attended. What I really liked, and this is maybe a compliment to you, I'm assuming that was your daughter there with you?
Yes, I got into bed that night and looked at social media, and she had circulated. She was with the counselors. She was with Rose at Nature League, and there was another one. She did the whole circle. Yes, that would be my daughter.
She pays attention when you're speaking because she's very informed.
I turned around and she had our stand all by herself.
Councillor Potts and I were attending the Collingwood Town Council booth, or not the Town Council booth, the Town of Collingwood booth. And as the kids were coming up, they were playing bingo and, as you know, going to all the different participants there and getting their stamp. Well, when they came to us, we were kind of quizzing them on what knowledge they had on Earth Day. And she turned it around on us, and she was asking us the question.
That sounds like my daughter, yes.
You know what? That's just great. It was really good to see that girl. I'm not sure her age, maybe 8 or 9.
She's petite. She's in grade 6, so
oh, she
almost
is
12.
very
She's
petite.
very petite. Her
but she's
auntie
very
Paula
knowledgeable.
Lehr
I just
is
want to
very short,
compliment that we have youth in this town that young that are interested in the program.
They're engaging, and that was a phenomenal event. We were at last year too, Jeff and I, and being obviously a different time of day, different day of the week, we didn't have the youth, and it was such a treat to have them interacting and to be able to engage one-on-one, play a game, and just make it interactive. It was really, really well done.
Well, thank you. I think we're so lucky to have your enthusiasm and knowledge, the expertise that you bring to this is awesome. And so thank you for all that you do. It's really fantastic.
Thank you. And we were asked as well to provide a little bit of guidance and perspective just from our viewpoint of No Mo May and all the other hashtags that we threw up on the screen here. So No Mo May is first and foremost, it is a UK movement. So dandelions and honeybees are both native to the UK, and neither one of them are native here. For honeybees, dandelions are a really great source of nutrients. The pollen is really great for them, easily digestible because honeybees are a generalist pollinator. They can really eat from anything. That changes a little bit when we move that kind of movement here, because as we all know, plants, pollinators, all sorts of wildlife is different here in North America than it is in the UK. So an example, some scientific research came out a number of years ago where they took bumblebee colonies and they fed them different kinds of pollen. And the ones that were fed nothing but dandelion pollen actually ended up not having any young because they had consumed them. And they consumed them because the dandelion pollen was actually so either indigestible or just nutrient unavailable. So it just goes to show you that like not all pollen, not all nectar, although from our point of view, it's the same sort of thing. It really is equivalent to different kinds of foods that we eat. So we say a lawn is sort of like an empty plate. There's no food there for pollinators. Dandelions is kind of like a bowl of chips or candy. There's something in there, but it's really not going to help you to do your best. It's not going to give you the nutrients that you require. If you were to, again, you would change that over into a native area where there's native plants that are blooming across the season with that diversity, then that's going to be something that's going to have your complex carbohydrates, your healthy fats, your amino acids, your proteins, all those sort of nutrients that bees require. And with 20,000 different species of bees across this planet and over 900 or so, 890 or so, in Canada, each one has a slightly different nutrient requirement. And quite a number of them are specialists. So although No Mo May can be a really great opportunity to connect with people and to start to build this discussion, we'd love for like a shift to happen where it's sleep in spring or it's save the stems or leave the leaves. Start to incorporate some of those broader ecologically important practices in order to support our native pollinators. I hope that answers your questions. And if you have any more, please, did I miss anything?
I was going to say,
I didn't read
in
anything.
terms of, the cherry, the willow, the maple. It's
Oh,
all
yes.
there.
So at this time of year, the best thing for our native pollinators are going to be shrubs and trees. And we don't tend to look up at a maple and think that it's flowering, but it is. And you can look up at a willow tree at this time of year and you can see it humming, and there's all the native bees. You've got the sweat bees, you've got everything sort of humming around those. So that's a really, it's the better resource. And there's lots of different variety, and then they start to bloom early spring. And then once those sort of shrubs and trees, they start to leaf out, then the perennials start to come up and those provide the resources. And that sort of changeover across the season is really important for our native pollinators. Oh, you want to talk about stem nest? Okay, she wants me to talk about stem nesting bees as well.
Because that's the whole thing of lazy
So
springs, lazy days.
save the stems and leave the leaves. Those are really to provide those nesting opportunities. So I was driving down, I live on Walnut. I was driving down my street the other day and there was 30 bags of leaves sitting out front of someone's house. In those leaves, that's the overwintering habitat for a lot of really beautiful and amazing native species. Not only that, but those leaves actually blanket the ground and help to protect and moderate the temperature of the ground so that those species come up and emerge at the correct time. So when you take all that away, then that really, when it throws out most of the pollinators that are overwintering in those leaves and stems, but then it really exposes the soil as well, which changes the processes in the soil for the native pollinators. In terms of the save the stems sort of hashtag, a lot of bees actually nest in the hollow pithy area of stems. So they will crawl in and then they'll sort of excavate it out, and then they'll lay an egg, close it up, lay another egg, close it up, all the way down the stem. And so when we start to remove those stems really early on in the season, again, you just throw those pollinators away before they've even had a chance to develop. So, the no mow May sort of thing is great. It's a great opportunity to have those discussions of, we don't need to be manicuring everything, but I think we can take another sort of further step and to leave the leaves, to save the stems, and to allow our spring gardens to sort of wake up in their own natural time as opposed to our own.
In terms of that, about 10 degrees Celsius consistent. So we've been trying to play with slogans, and we're talking about putting it out on Facebook today. I think Carrington's making a post. Come up with an alternative slogan to No Mow May that somehow is catchy enough, that says it's about just letting habitat rest because it's not ready to come out yet. That's not how our native environment works.
Well, thank you for explaining that. Deputy Mayor Fryer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's great food for thought. So we're kind of like the bees getting our pollen from you in that regard. Because I have been planning on bringing a motion forward at the committee of the whole, or a notice. Sorry, and as you say, it's about steps, right, and creating that kind of movement towards the overall objective. And the one thing I will follow up with tomorrow, I'll talk to county staff in regards to the idea of the waste, the leaf waste pickup being delayed until after the May 24th, so that it can maybe be in a little warmer temperature and a little more appropriate time, and see what we can find out about that. So again, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So following up, as a rule of thumb, I am one of those who have left the leaves. And I would assume if you're 10 degrees consistently, we're talking, as a rule of thumb, about the 24th of May, that it's okay for me to go in and rake?
Again, we're talking about steps here.
I know.
So yes, if you'd like to remove things from your garden at that point, that's certainly a better time. But if you are talking about like having the most ecologically beneficial practices, then you leave the leaves.
Leave the leaves, okay.
And you can cut the stems and you can put them back down in the garden, and then you've got free mulch.
I'll tell my neighbors too, so don't think I'm lazy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. That was very important news to share. Thank you. Okay, so I think we had a mover and a seconder for our confirmation bylaw, did we? Okay. So all those in favor? Thank you. And so what we'll do just before we do our adjournment, we'll come back at 5 to start the committee of the whole. So who would like to move an adjournment for this? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you so much. All those in favor? And see you in 25 minutes.